Life Pixers. Hope you're having an awesome day. Are you ready to better understand yourself, your partner, and your marriage? Yes, you will on today's episode with Dr. Chloe. Ooh, I'm super excited to introduce you to Dr. Chloe. Before I bring her on, you know that we're on for 1 million downloads per episode by the end of 2025. So if you know anyone who could benefit from this episode, share it with them so that way you'll be helping them and you're helping us at the same time. Now, Dr. Chloe is a clinical psychologist all over TV and is the author of 2 books, including our most recent one, Nervous Energy, which you can find at nervousenergybook.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Chloe, for being here. You want to start by telling us something funny you did as a kid that your parents laugh about till today?
Sure. So it's great to be with you too, ST, I would just say. And as a kid, it's kind of funny. When I was 8 years old, I told everybody that when I grew up, I was going to live in New York and be on television and be an author. And sure enough, indeed, all of those things ended up happening. So it's kind of a funny story, but a happy one too.
How did you know at such a young age that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I always loved writing. And so, my first book, I think, is probably not for your audience because it's Dr. Chloe's 10 Commandments of Dating. I know most of your audience here is already married. But my second book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, was definitely just a lot of fun for me to write because I don't know, I've just always loved writing. And I just fell in love with New York, the idea of New York. Even as a very little girl, I had a teacher that just would tell us stories about New York. And I don't know, I just always saw myself going to New York, writing a book and being on TV. It was just something in my head and my heart. I don't know.
I love that. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Michigan. How about you?
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey. So to me, New York was like, I was there a million times.
Yes. I see. For me, I didn't get to go there until I was 17 for the first time. So it was always had this mystique to it.
Was it like this dream come true when you did?
Totally. I mean, it's very different from where I grew up. So, and it was so much fun to even like with my other interests of like publishing and academia and psychology, just all the thought leaders and everything that you find in a major city like that. I mean, I love small towns too, but there's something special when you have a whole hub of, just the millions and millions of people that are all gathered together.
Yeah, that's for sure. So then at what point did you know you wanted to go more into like what you specialize in, the stress and the anxiety versus just general psychology?
Well, because I started off as a yoga teacher before I was a psychologist, my interest was already in stress management, wellness, and goal attainment. And I was teaching individual yoga lessons to stressed out New Yorkers that wanted individual yoga lessons to really help them manage their stress and achieve their goals. Basically achieve more by doing less, essentially. And that was such great work and such fulfilling work that I wanted to go deeper into how the mind was doing that work. And so that's how and why I ended up getting a PhD in clinical psychology.
So before that, you weren't a psychologist, only after you did that.
Right. I started off as a yoga teacher and then became a clinical psychologist later.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, really like your whole background played into it and probably like you're still a huge fan of yoga.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm starting probably a yoga emotion workshop is one of my favorite workshops from the past. And I'm getting ready to potentially launch it online as well. So if people are interested, they can go to nervousenergybook.com and they can get some free gifts and things there. And then once you sign up into my mailing list, I'll keep you posted on all the things that I end up offering because everything's going to be online now. We're 100% virtual, so people can participate from anywhere.
So what's the difference between this yoga emotion session versus regular yoga?
Well, that's a really good question. So I think that I could have absolutely led a yoga emotion workshop just as a yoga teacher without a PhD in clinical psych. But now that I have all this additional just training in emotions and understanding how they work and how to talk about them, I just think it's going to be a richer workshop. But what we basically do is we do some yoga poses and learn how to use yoga poses to evoke certain emotions. We learn how to understand what emotions emotions feel like in our bodies, all that kind of stuff. It can actually be a lot of fun for couples to do together as well sometimes, or even just when people work on themselves as individuals. I think it brings a richness to the relationship as well.
Yeah, so I guess that from what I understand, from what you're saying, it would be like especially beneficial for people who like suppress their emotions and don't really know how to identify different types of emotions and what signs they're trying to tell you.
Well, that would be one set of people, yes, that it could be helpful for people who do suppress their emotions and they want some help just learning how to spend time being with them and noticing them and talking about them. Also, though, for people who are already pretty fluent and interested in emotions, this would be a chance to go deeper in that and just to also have community with other people that are interested in those things, because that's also how we grow and build our perspective. And even learning about other people's emotions and what those are like for them can be enriching for us as well, for just people who are interested in just broadening our experience of emotions.
Yeah. That's for sure. Okay. So now I know you sometimes say that anxiety is good. Why is that?
Sure. Well, anxiety does have a healthy function, which is to stimulate preparation behaviors. So, for example, a person with no anxiety wouldn't think to look both ways before they cross the street, right? So, definitely a little bit of anxiety is healthy and normal. And what I just want is for people to not end up getting anxious about being anxious, because that's when the anxiety snowballs on itself. And that's when we end up getting actually so distracted by the anxiety that we forget to point our attention at whatever is the actual source of the anxiety, if the anxiety becomes a sideshow in and of itself.
Okay. So, like every other emotion, that like there's a reason why you have that emotion and it's there to give you a sign. And as long as you let the emotion be processed, sit through you, and take the sign and act on the sign and what is necessary, then that is healthy without it like blowing out of proportion. Same with anger or frustration or something else.
Exactly right, Esty. That's exactly right.
Okay. So, how has all this work affected your own relationship?
That is a very interesting question. So, I mean, I can give you my answer and then you could ask my husband and see what he thinks. So, just to share as well, my husband and I will celebrate our eighth wedding anniversary in April, and our son is going to turn 5 years old this December. We have, I think, a great relationship. But it is true. I think that being a psychologist has a kind of probably a two-sided coin in relationships. So my husband is in finance. He's, not a psychologist, but he loves mental health. He loves wellness. He loves self-improvement. And I like business. So, we actually kind of help each other. So I think in some ways it's, probably a two-sided coin to be married to Dr. Chloe, right? So on one sense, it's nice because I'm always willing to kind of step back and talk about emotions and think about our patterns and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, from the other side, I imagine it's probably kind of exhausting for him to feel like he's married to someone who actually always does think she's an expert on the topic, because I actually am. But that doesn't mean that I'm actually, of course, always an expert on what's really going on between us. So I'm sure it's a two-sided coin.
So, do you think is like a certain pressure or like not?
I wouldn't say there's a pressure necessarily, but maybe just, maybe more of a bottomless willingness and desire to constantly talk about things or, work through things. But I will say that we also don't hesitate to see somebody, like if we, get into a situation where our lines are crossed or our horns are locked or we're just not connecting, because it's so important to both of us to connect. And we don't want to feel that it's like all the pressure is on us to figure everything out ourselves, or that just because I'm a psychologist, I should somehow be like our own relationship therapist. Like that would be kind of weird, right? So whenever we do get in that situation, we don't hesitate to talk to somebody. We have somebody that we really like, and we probably talk to her, maybe a half a dozen times a year. It's not like a regular thing, but it's more just like when life throws us a curveball and we want some help to process it as a couple, we don't hesitate to talk.
Yeah. Like prepared, you're making sure you're like, as soon as something gets a little bit off, you get taking care of it right away so it doesn't go and blow up into something else.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's awesome. So, Dr. Chloe, what does your son think of your marriage?
Oh, well, I mean, he has never yeah. So he's never known, like in any other way, obviously, like we were married before he was born, and our marriage has always been very stable and solid. So I think he thinks of it in a positive way, because even though he's only just about 5, he loves to talk about how one day he's going to grow up and have a wife. And he talks about how he's going to have kiddos and that I'm going to babysit them.
You're wrong. Okay. He's already giving you jobs.
Yeah. Which honestly, though, I volunteer. I love the idea, and I, would love to have grandkids. So I admit I actually kind of cheer it on. I think it's really cute. So I think that means that he probably feels pretty good about our marriage. I'll tell you, though, something kind of funny as far as like what he thinks about me being a psychologist. This is really cute. He found a Dr. Seuss book, and he came to me, and he knows that, like in the media and everything, I'm Dr. Chloe, and he sees my books, Dr. Chloe Carmichael on the cover. So he brings me the Dr. Seuss book, and he says, "Do you know him? Do you know Dr. Seuss? Do you work with him?" And I said, "No, I don't."
I wish I did, right?
Yeah, I wish I did.
Oh, that's adorable. Oh, wow. Okay. So do you find that because of obviously your experience as a psychologist and everything that you've been working on and working with people, it affects the way you are relating with him, right? And so as you're relating with him, then do you think there's right? Like we said already, there's no pressure there, but do you think that there's something like, do you constantly think, how else should I change this? How else can I make this better? Or you're like, I'm just a good parent, whatever is fine. It's all okay.
Well, probably somewhere in the middle, having a little bit of knowledge about the brain and social relationships, as well as cognitive development. I studied all of those things. Getting a PhD in clinical psychology, and those things matter to me. So, just little things like knowing, of course, that it helps so much when you spend time reading to your child or helping them learn to label their emotions. If ever, his name is Billy, like whenever Billy gets frustrated or hurts himself, I always really coach him to make sure he talks through it, that even when he's very upset, he can use his words to just describe what happened and stay connected. That's really important to me. And, I've been so thrilled to just be fostering a love of reading and a love of learning in him. I think as a psychologist, I think it does give me a little bit more of maybe insider knowledge about that stuff. But on the other hand, I feel like I've learned a lot just as a mom, stuff that I only learned about in books in graduate school about, say, the maternal bond or, maternal connections that like maybe I had studied on an intellectual level. But my son is actually teaching me every day. I feel my heart growing bigger every day, just learning and experiencing what that is like with him. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah. It's like getting it in the books and getting the real life practice of it afterwards. Okay, so now getting to stress, all those high achievers, people who want their marriage to be extraordinary, and they're working on it every single day, listening to this episode 4 times a week, implementing all the tips and tools, still have stress. What do you recommend for someone whose life is busy and still wants to be stressed and relaxed at the same time?
Yeah. So that's
not stressed, less stressed and more relaxed.
Yeah. Well, but it's an interesting way that you worded it though, Esty. And I think that, that there's actually a lot there, because high achieving people who do want to improve themselves and live their best lives, by definition, they are actually going to always be, or not always, but often be pushing themselves to the outer limits of what's currently comfortable for them, right? So that actually triggers stress. We think of stress as being the response that we get when we are at the outer limits of our capabilities. And it's actually in the outer limits of our capabilities that we grow our skills, that we grow our capabilities. So for anyone who's ever been at the gym lifting weights, it's at that moment when your muscles are shaking because you're lifting a weight that's so heavy. That's when your muscles are growing. Or when you're on the treadmill huffing and puffing, but you keep going, that's when your lungs are getting bigger. So it's actually through stress that we grow. So I would say, first of all, ST, I would want people to normalize the experience of stress. Just like I don't want people to get anxious about being anxious, I don't want people to get stressed about being stressed, when stress is sometimes just part of the package of growing. On the other hand, there's a different kind of stress, which is maybe where you're just habitually taking on way too much and you're not even connecting with the emotions and the fulfillment around what you're going through. Or maybe you're going through it all by yourself because you're pushing yourself and you're pushing yourself, but you're not taking the time to open up and tell your spouse about what's happening, or your support network, and let them in and see your vulnerability and see your struggle, even your healthy struggle, and step in there and support you with it. So I would say I would just want to make sure that you don't try to think that there's something wrong with the stress, but that you also make sure that you are getting all the support and the connection that you should have when you're under that kind of growing stress.
Yeah. That goes back to what I think is the basis to everything, is self-awareness, being aware, is this healthy stress, or is this stress just making my life crazier, and not being able to connect with my emotions and not being able to really improve my relationship. That's what I'm trying to do, but I'm getting stressful about it. That's not really very helpful. Versus this is stress that I want to grow. This is having a growth mindset of being able to be like, okay, this is a challenge. I'm going to figure it out. And and it's stressful, but I'm going to be able to go and do this.
Mm-hmm.
So specifically, if let's say somebody has got it, they identify the right types of stress, they know what's good, they know what's right for them, but they see that there's some parts of the stress that is not so good for them in their life, and they want to reduce some of that. What do you suggest to them to do?
Well, reduce it, right? If you've identified that you're feeling stressed out because, you thought you and your spouse maybe should learn something new together. So that's great. So you signed up for the salsa dance class together or whatever. And then you discover that in fact, you actually hate salsa. It's just, you've got, two left feet. It's just not working for you. Or the teacher is just mean and nasty and terrible. And so the class is just not working out. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, we need to tweak our approach here. I like the idea of us learning something new together. I get that it's not always going to be easy, but this particular class is just not the right fit. And then you can change it up if you have to. So it's always good to be flexible and be willing to actually remove the things in your life that are just simply really actually not working.
Yeah. I think that it's going back to what was your goal of it? You wanted to go and learn something new. It wasn't especially to learn salsa. I mean, if that was your goal, then you would have to find another way to reduce the stress. Maybe if you would have a private class versus everyone together or something else, but understanding what's actually,
or have a margarita
here
before class.
Yeah, right. Okay, so for the stress expert, what is something that keeps you up at night?
Oh, you know what? What keeps me up at night, this is actually kind of funny. What keeps me up at night is ideas. I get so excited about a new masterclass, that I'm planning of how to turn your anxiety into a superpower, or a social media relationship that I realize I should do a group thing with this person and that person, or even my husband and I realized that we know these two couples that both own a fitness gym. And I was we should have them over together for cocktails at the same time and introduce them. So I get really excited with ideas to the point where honestly, what I have to do sometimes is listen to a good audiobook to just what I call hijack my internal monologue, so that I'll just focus on that, nice, pleasant story. And then my wheels will just stop spinning a little bit, because I know sometimes that's actually the best thing. Similarly, I have other clients that will they'll get so into like their projects and they'll think about them and everything they need to do to move it forward to the point where they can't sleep. And so I'll tell them to either listen to audiobooks or repeat to themselves, the most productive thing I can do right now is sleep. The most productive thing I can do right now is sleep. So that's what keeps me up at night, is just excitement and ideas.
Oh, wow. So is there like any, I'm sure there is. My question is, what are they? Those like bad, but like those challenging moments where it's not so calm and stressful and exciting and like emotions that make us feel good.
Yes. You mean like when I run into a problem? Yeah. I mean, so again, I try to put these things into perspective. And this is one of the things that I do talk about in my book, Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety, is I have a whole section on perfectionism, which is where we try to actually learn how to put our problems into perspective. So I tell a story, for example, about like how I had a big customer order, some inventory situation, and then I wasn't going to have enough money to cover my payroll because of the expenditure. And, it was like a bit of a cash flow hiccup. And so I was just for a moment kind of turning on myself, so to speak, like really beating myself up. And then I had to take a step back and say, wait a minute, this is actually kind of a fancy problem to have, right? Like I have a staff, I have a payroll, I had a big order, I needed to fill it. In fact, then it freed me up to start realizing like, well, I do have excellent credit and a great relationship with my bank. I bet they could just quickly authorize a business line of credit for me. Many businesses have that for just such an occasion. This is fine. And I was able to cover it and, live to tell the story in my book. But one of the things that was key to that for me, and I think is the takeaway that would cover most challenges for, in general, when people are saying, what do I do when I hit a wall, is talk to people. One of the most exciting things, I started to say God gave us the gift of language, but for people who maybe don't believe in God, I would also just say evolutionary psychologists speculate that part of the reason human beings evolved to such a sophisticated society is because of language, because we have the ability to talk over problems and learn from each other and get perspective on them and learn about solutions from each other. So when I hit a wall, the first thing I do is I talk about it or I journal about it. Journaling is another great way of just finding the words. Sometimes I journal and I create a really good outline of what the problem is. And then I call someone and talk about it so I can have a good, cogent, hit them hard thing of like, here's what the issue is. Here's what I've tried. And what ideas do you have?
Wow. Yeah, I really like that, especially the journaling part. One of the things I do is journal with people with their non-dominant hand. I'm sure you've heard of that. Gets direct access to the amygdala. So like all emotions go straight out. And it's really cool. It works really well to journal like that.
No, I actually haven't heard that. That's very interesting. Where did you come across that?
So I was trained by Dr. Lucia Capacchione, the author of Recover Your Inner Child.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So she does like you work with both hands back and forth. So before we get to our final question, where can Life Pixers connect with you, get your book, and learn more about you?
So I would just say I am super social and I would love people to connect with me. So I'm deliberately all over social media. So if you can share in your show notes the link drchloe.com/hello. Or, I do my videos on YouTube. I'm all over Instagram and everywhere. I also have a free newsletter, or they can just go to nervousenergybook.com. And that's where they can sign up for some of the master classes and things that I'm planning. And if they do decide to come to my website and message me on social media or through my website, and they mention that they found me through LifePix, I have a special gift. So I love connections. I became a psychologist, in part just because I love people. So I would encourage people to connect. And if you do decide to get my books, I would just ask a big favor, please, please, please leave me reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, because those are kind of the lifeblood these days, is to get those reviews.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So you have to like remind people, like get the book now, and in like another week, remind them like, now go leave your review.
Please.
Okay. So for our final question, how would you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, trust, or intimacy?
Fun, fluid, safe, authentic.
I love that so much. It has like the real part, the actual, like the connection part, and at the same time, the fun. Because without that, you are not it's just so boring.
Yeah, we have to be able to be ourselves. I do think it's important that it should be pleasant and enjoyable, but we also do have to be able to keep it real.
100%. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Chloe. This was amazing. And it was so much fun speaking with you.
Thanks, Esty. The pleasure was mine.
That's all for this episode of the Life Fix University podcast, but I have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support the show, but will also help the people you love most. We are striving for 1 million downloads by the end of 2025, and we can't do this without your help. If you love this episode, please share it with 2 of your family and friends so they too can rewire their brains to have an extraordinary marriage. It was awesome spending time with you, and I'll see you on the next episode.